Hey everybody, welcome back. Again, Tony with Shinsho Yoga, and I'm on location here at the Yoga Loft in Freehold, New Jersey, where I teach Tuesday nights. I do a Tuesday night vinyasa class. And today we're going to talk about Warrior 2 pose, or Virabhadrasana 2. So prior video I talked about Warrior 1 being a pose that comes from a martial arts stance, an open hand fighting stance or sword fighting stance. And Warrior 2 is the same thing, that it comes from martial arts. But this is not coming from an open hand or a sword fighting stance. It comes from a spear or a staff stance. And this is the difference in that, in what we do with our feet. So in our Warrior 1 pose, we want those hips square. So we want our feet about hip distance apart, maybe a little greater depending on the body, right? So that our hips can face forward. So we can torque those hips and have them forward, because in martial arts that's where your power is going to come from, is coming from those hips. In Japanese they call it hara. Chinese it's called the lower dantian, right? Power is going to come from the hips. In our Warrior 2 pose, being that it's coming from a spear or a staff fighting stance, you can't have the hips forward when you're holding the weapon. They have to be turned off to the side, because you have to be able to have the weapon, this is called loaded, to be able to strike. And then the hips come forward on the strike. And we do something similar in Warrior 2. In Warrior 2 versus Warrior 1, our heel and instep are in line. In Warrior 1, we've got that our heel and our feet are not in line with each other. Right? Our back foot is at a 45, our front foot is parallel there with the mat, and we have them wide enough to square the hips. But in Warrior 2, we take the back foot parallel with the back edge of the mat, and that front foot still parallel but in line now with the heel. So it's like this, right? Actually in line with the instep here in the center, right? This way. You know, each person's body's different, so don't harp on that when you line up. Do the best you can. Just don't have them like this, and don't have them like this. Line them up as best you can, like this. Right? So the heel and instep are in line. Now, how are you going to get the hips forward in that? Once again, it's that torquing of the hip that we talked about in the prior video. So Warrior 1 and Warrior 2 have the same torquing of the hip. It's just how it works out is different with it lined up. You're not going to have the hips completely square and forward, right? They're going to be a little off to the side because the heel and instep are in line. That's okay. That's this posture. And what that torquing of the hip does, that's coming from, again, martial arts, from a staff or spear fighting stance, is that when you strike with the weapon, you drive with the hip. You're not just taking your arm and going like this. The hip comes through and strikes, because again, the power coming from here. And this, what we're doing in Warrior 2, is we're mimicking that stance. So we're actually doing the same thing with the hips that we did in Warrior 1. The back hip moves forward, the front hip moves back. We're still going to drive back with that back heel to drive that hip forward, and then that front one is going to come back, looking to come to that square in the front knee. So those movements are the same. It's just with the legs in line versus separate this way, the range of motion is going to be different and the feeling is going to be different. Also, what we do with the arms is different. In Warrior 1, we're taking the arms above the head, the palms face in, the shoulders relaxed. In Warrior 2, we open the arms up and we gaze off that front finger, right? But once again, you allow the shoulders to relax, right? You don't want to be like this in the warrior, right? You want them relaxed, and that torquing of the hip is going to have that chest come forward, right? Somewhat. You're not going to be facing sideways. You're going to let that relax, and you're not going to be leaning back or forward. It's going to be, again, that long line of energy. That sinking of the tailbone, the lifting of the crown, the spinal expansion that we go for in all of our standing poses in our practice. So let's demonstrate versus explaining. So we're going to come into this from our Warrior 1 position. So from our warrior one, right, we're here with our hips about hip distance apart. That back foot is about at a 45. Front foot is parallel with the long edge of the mat, trying to come to that square as best we can. That heel drives back, which brings this hip forward. This one comes back. Arms above the head, shoulders relaxed. Now, come into our warrior two. We're going to take that back heel. We're going to spin that down so it's parallel with the back edge of the mat. Taking that front foot, we're going to move that into the midline so the heel and the instep are in line. All right? Now, again, looking to come to that square in the knee as we drive that back heel down, which torques this hip forward. And you can imagine a line of energy coming out around the knee and plugging in over here that takes everything this way. Now my hips are not going to be square forward because of this length. Right? They're going to be a little this way. That's okay. That's this posture. And we open our arms up. Right? We're going to gaze off the front finger. Let the shoulders relax. Long, not this, not this. Just upright, length. Hips are torqued. And breathe. I did the same thing in the opposite direction. Right. Heel and instep in line. Drive that back. This drives forward. That drives down, which pushes this forward. This drives back. Energy coming out around the knee. Open the arms up. Gaze off the front finger. Right. And we breathe. Allow the shoulders to relax. Looking forward. Not this. Not this, right? Not this. This. What I often do is I'll flip my palms up to allow my shoulders to relax and then bring them back down. Hips are torquing. Breathe. And sink. Now this comes from a martial arts stance because in martial arts, when you have a staff, you're fighting with a staff, with a sword, you can be forward. You've got the sword, here or here. Well, a staff, you don't do that. You have to use the length of the weapon. So if I had a staff here, this way with my hips this way, the weapon would be pointing that way when I need it pointed at the person who's coming at me. And that's why the heel and the instep line up, so you can have the weapon long here. And then when you fire the weapon, you're holding the back here, you drive through. The hip comes forward. That's where this comes from. So, warrior one, hips are forward. Warrior two, not so forward. Lack of a better way to put it. Warrior one, square hips. Legs are in line with the shoulders, the hips. Warrior two, line the heel and the instep up. But again, that same feeling. Back hip, drive that back heel down, which brings the back hip forward, pulling the front hip back, letting that front knee come to a square. Again, the shoulders relax. Not reaching, right, either which way, just relaxed. And again, think of a plumb line from the crown of the head to the tailbone, a long line of energy. Just expanding the spine. Let the tailbone sink, let the crown lift. And breathe. Warrior two, Virabhadrasana 2. Any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Be happy to talk to you. Thanks again for watching. Namaste.